right, well, this video covers Chapter 7, Laws of Agency, and there are 10 possible questions on your state licensing exam. Let me first tell you that we are going to learn the law of agency, but as you see here on the board, this does not apply to Oklahoma for realtors. So we're going to learn it. It's going to be part of your process and part of your test, but it will not be something that you do in the practice of everyday practice of real estate. We have something that's a little different. It's called Oklahoma Transaction Brokerage Law. We'll deal with that in a different chapter. It's one of the handouts that you receive in your initial package. So Oklahoma does transaction brokerage. That's what the law that applies to us. But in other states, they have the law of agency. Okay, so I just want to clarify that before we got started. Let me reference this board because it'll help you understand as we go through the material. In agency, you have a relationship. So to simplify this as best I can, is when you list or represent a buyer in a transaction, they're the principal. And I have out here S or B, which is seller or buyer. Next is agent, which would be you as a licensee or agent. And out here I have LB, which could represent the listing broker. Then I have here the sub-agent, and this could be the selling broker, so there might be two companies involved in the sale, which is pretty dominant. Then you have a client, which could be one of the parties in the transaction that actually has no representation. So just formulate in your mind, this is what the relationship is. Now, to the principal, to the agent, you have a relationship. I discussed that. It's called a fiduciary relationship. What is a fiduciary relationship? In simplistic terms, it's a trust and confidence relationship. All right? Okay, now let's go ahead and go to the text. Law of agency on page 85. I'll read that first. A, the brokerage business is one of agency. The broker is hired by the principal to become his or her agent. Simple enough. Go to 2. The principal is the party who delegates to the agent the authority to represent the principal's interest in a transaction. Well, it's similar to maybe an attorney-client relationship. When the attorney talks, or in our case, when the agent talks, that is essentially just like the seller or buyer talking. So whenever two agents are negotiating back and forth, the assumption is that they're doing that with the seller or the buyer's blessing. So that's how that process works. Go to 3. Agency refers to the fiduciary relationship between the agent and the principal. Go to 4. Fiduciary describes the relationship of trust and confidence. There it is in black and white. Go to 6. The customer is the third party for whom service is provided. There might be in a case that a client might have no representation. And we'll go through, in the back of your chapter, they'll give you some examples and some test questions, some sample questions that shed some light on what scenarios that might, or when those scenarios might happen. 8, single agency involves a broker representing either the seller or the buyer in a transaction. Limitation avoids conflicts and results in loyalty and client-based service to just one client. Single agency could be a situation where a broker represented the seller and the buyer in the same one. It's called dual agency. Okay, so let me explain further about what dual agency is. Dual agency is acceptable, but it has to be with disclosure. Okay, so a dual agent situation where you have a listing broker, maybe an agent from from the brokerage, and then an agent that's within the same brokerage. They have to disclose that relationship. Okay, that's called dual agency. Go to B. It's an acronym, COLD. So when you have the duty to your principal, these are the things that are requirements of you. The broker must perform duties of COLD: care, obedience, you have to be obedient. You have to account for all funds and monies, earnest money. You have to be loyal, and look at loyalty. Can you be loyal to more than one? Well, you really can't. The idea is that you're loyal to one means you want one, or you're representing one party. You can't be loyal to 2 or 3 different parties. So that's important. And disclosure for the principal. So disclosure, that's part of your job. You can be obedient and loyal, but if there's something wrong with a property that the seller doesn't want to disclose, well, you can't do that. Just because you have loyalty to the party doesn't mean you can be fraudulent or anything else of that nature. Go to the next page, 86C. And this is where, when we discuss that client, or rather that agent-principal relationship, that you have to still, you're obligated to disclose to the customer all known material facts about a property. So even if you know it and the seller, for whatever reason, doesn't want to say anything about it or misses it, it's your duty or responsibility to clarify or add that information or make sure that's disclosed. Go to D1, general agent versus special agent. 1. A general agent is one authorized by another to negotiate contracts for that person in a given range of matters. So think about this. A general agent might be an attorney that represents a client in a whole host of different things. It could be some litigation, it could be probate, wills, trust, and that they're a general agent for multiple things in a person's family. Go to 3, a special agent is authorized to represent the principal in one specific transaction. Well, that's where we come into play. When we represent a principal, we are representing them in the sale of a home or the purchase of a home. So that's a special or a specific reason. Go to E, to be entitled to a brokerage commission, a broker must. Now, here are the things that have to be in place for a broker to receive or be entitled to a commission. This is how you earn your money. 1, be a licensed broker. You cannot get funds or be paid if you're unlicensed. Number 2, be the procuring cause of the sale or purchase. That means, procuring cause means that you are the one that caused the sale of the property, whether you're on the buying side or the listing side. 3, be employed by the principal. Well, how do we get employed? Well, in the real estate business, you don't go and get employed or get hired by someone. Essentially what happens is whenever you go to a listing, then that listing or that seller will employ you by a listing contract or a listing agreement. So the way that we get, quote, employed is we go to a seller, they sign a listing document. That listing document says, I'm going to do all of these things to procure a sale for you, and I'm going to do it between this time and this time. Once it's over with, then you can, our agreement is done. You can go and decide to keep marketing your property with another company. You can do whatever you want to for that matter. So that is what the employment of the principal is. You have to have a document employing you, and it's on the listing side, it's called a listing agreement. On the buyer side, it's a buyer brokerage agreement. And then last 4, act according to the laws of agency. And what are the laws of agency? Fiduciary relationship, showing trust and confidence, and understanding the disclosure laws that you have to abide by. We're on the same page, page 86. Dual agency, without both parties' prior written mutual knowledge and consent. The broker is prohibited from representing both the seller and a buyer in the same transaction. So the operative words are without both parties' prior written mutual knowledge. Well, how do we get this information to them prior to this happening? When you list a property, that listing agreement has a portion of the listing agreement is written that states, if at some point in time an agent from my company shows this listing, will you agree would you agree to allow that to happen? It's, I guess, the best way I can come up with. they can either say yes or no. So what we do is when we list a property, we already know whether or not they're going to allow that dual agency to occur. So what do you need to know for the exam? Well, know that you have to get prior written mutual consent prior to that engaging in that activity or allowing someone to actually show and sell that property. Right. Go to N, the bottom of the page. All offers must be presented by the broker to the principal promptly when received. Now, you're going to see kind of a turn, and that turn is that we're discussing agency kind of in the first part of this chapter. But then, as we get into it, you're going to notice that all the way through the next enumerated amount or next enumerated page, these are things that also apply to Oklahoma in our state. So the first section is kind of heavily weighted to agency, but then a lot of these other things apply to agency states plus Oklahoma. N is one of those. One of your duties as a licensee is when an offer comes in, you present it. If an offer seems to be much less than sales price, it doesn't seem like they could possibly be serious with such a ridiculous offer. That is conjecture. That's opinion. You cannot make those decisions. If you receive a bona fide offer, as a duty as a licensee, you have to present that offer. It says present all offers. So what we want is we want buyers and sellers to dictate which offers are presented rather than agents in the process. So that's one of your obligations, to present all offers when presented. Top of page 87. O, a fixed place of business must be maintained by the broker. So this is kind of segueing into brokerage law. You have to have some place where the public can come in, knock on the door and say, hey, I need to talk to someone. Because all listings, and even in buyer situations, the individual that's responsible is the principal broker of the company. If the agent decides to go on vacation, somebody needs to be there to be able to handle all those actions and those negotiations. So if an agent happens to go on vacation, they can go during normal business hours and discuss some issue that they have with the broker. Okay, so that's why you have O. P, the broker may be required to deposit all funds entrusted to her or him in a trust account, or do what all parties agree should be done with the funds. And this is also important, that last sentence, and may not commingle such funds with the operating funds. When you receive earnest money, and that's part and parcel of your real estate sales contracts, very, very important that you understand. You take those monies after the consummated sale and put them in a trust account directly. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. You go directly to the trust account. Commingling means that if a broker took $1,000, put it in their operating account, thing that they use to pay their bills and commissions and all that, and then say, oops, I forgot, I should have put it in this account, that's commingling, whether by accident or intent. You cannot commingle. Okay, so that's one widely testable piece of information. Q, the broker generally is prohibited from placing blind ads, those that do not identify the broker as the advertiser. A blind ad can mean a couple different things. If you pick up any of these real estate magazines around, you're going to see the name of the associate or agent, and then you're going to see the brokerage name somewhere on that ad. That's a requirement. That broker's name has to be somewhere on that ad. Okay? If you don't, that's called a blind ad. There's also situations that deem a blind advertisement is if you don't show that you have a relationship or the actual seller of the property is licensed. That's also prohibited, where if you list and sell your own house, you have to have it on your sign, and you have to make sure that the public knows when they call you that they're actually talking to a licensee. R, the broker's commission is negotiable between the client and the broker, is specified in the agency agreement, and is computed as a percentage of the total amount of money involved, but may be expressed as a flat fee. Net listings generally are not allowed in most states. This is also very important. If you were to poll members of the public, they might not even know how we negotiate commissions. Or they might say, well, isn't there some kind of standard fee? No, there is no standard fee. The listing broker and the seller get together and they determine what the listing fee is. So that's why it's important for the test that you understand that it's negotiated by the client and the broker. Okay, because if you got a whole bunch of brokers and all got together and said, let's all charge X, that's called price fixing. You can't do that. That's illegal. So what you do is that you and your seller sit down, you negotiate out based on the amount of work that you're doing, the commission paid out to the selling broker, and a myriad of different things is how you determine. So it's by negotiation. S, buyer's agency. The broker may be hired by a potential buyer. The broker and buyer usually draw up a buyer's agency agreement. So let's go to S1. Those buyer-broker agreements, here are the characteristics. 1, be fair and honest to the seller, but owes greater responsibility to the buyer, including the duty of skill and care to promote and safeguard the buyer's best interest. So that's what those buyer's agreements are. 2, disclose to the buyer pertinent facts. That's obvious. 3, use negotiating strategy and bargaining talents in the buyer's best interest. So as an agent, you're going to be representing one side or the other, unless it's a dual agent situation. So if you're with the principal, or you're rather with the seller, you're representing the seller's best interest. If you have a buyer, in this case, then you're representing the buyer's best interest. And this is really not relevant in that case, so you could have two agents. Go to T. This is Oklahoma specific. T is describing what Oklahoma does, that we don't have agency. Here's what we have, and it's a transaction brokerage. The transactional broker, a non-agent or a facilitator is a good way to put it, is not an agent of either party. The transaction broker does, and these are the three things that are inherent in a transaction brokerage relationship. We'll get into this also in a completely other chapter. We'll cover all this. 1, assist the buyer and seller with formalities, necessary paperwork required for transferring ownership of real property. 2, is expected to treat all parties honestly and competently and is equally responsible for both. 3, may not disclose confidential information to either party and may not negotiate for either the seller or the buyer. So, the reason we call it a transaction broker in our state is because we don't have a loyalty to one or the other. The idea is that we're loyal to a certain extent to both, that we're honest, fair, anything that they tell us in confidence remains in confidence. All of those things. So we're kind of the go-between, I guess you can call it, or the transactional broker in between both parties. So we don't have loyalty one over the other in like an agency relationship. Go to Roman numeral 2, salespersons. Starting with A, salespersons are responsible only to the brokers under whom they are licensed and can carry out only those responsibilities assigned by their brokers. Okay, this is describing the agency relationship between your broker and you as a licensee. You'll notice we don't have agency that extends to our clients. We do have agency between us and our broker, because when we go out and represent ourselves, we're really a representative of the brokerage. So you need to understand that where we differ in Oklahoma is that we might have an agency relationship between us as a licensee and our own brokers that employ us, or hire us rather, as an independent contractor. It just doesn't extend into our client-agent relationship. That doesn't extend to that relationship. Okay? Next, B, salespersons have no authority to make contracts or receive compensation directly from principals. When you sell a property as an agent or a licensee, the commission goes to the broker, then from the broker to you based on your commission schedule. You can't receive direct funds from the principal That's forbidden. C, all salesperson's activities must be carried out in the name of their supervising brokers. Again, with a blind ad example, everything that you do is representing your broker, the principal broker. You advertise, you list, you sell in the name of the brokerage as a licensee. Top of page 88, D, salespersons may work under brokers either as an independent contractor or an employee. The vast majority of the people that get licensed go to work for a broker as an independent contractor. The difference and the distinction between an independent contractor and an employee is the employees are what you normally understand as an employee. You go to work, you come in at 9, you leave at 5, you get X dollars per hour, it's your whatever benefits that you have, that's an employee. Independent contractors don't have those same stipulations. They just have the stipulation is that you might be required to come in and do the mandatory training and that kind of thing. But it's your payment is based on your sales rather than coming in on a 9-to-5 type job, hourly rate or whatever you might have. So that's the difference. The other thing is that when you have an employee, you take those taxes out, associated taxes. With an independent contractor, they're responsible for paying their taxes. E, salespersons are compensated on the basis of agreements between themselves and their broker. So you pass your real estate licensing exam. Come out of the class and say, yay, I've passed. Or come out of the PSI office and say, yay, I've passed my exam. Go on board with the broker. They're going to have an agreement that says, here are all of my requirements. Here are all the things that I do, and here's what my requirements are, and whatever it is. It'll also say, and here's what I will get paid if I sell a house. A lot of them have these kind of graduated commissions. The more you sell, the higher your commission can be. But that's up to you and the broker to negotiate all that. But that's what that agreement is. Get your license, you go to a brokerage, and you'll sign some kind of an independent contractor agreement. F, salespersons may not place ads without identifying their associated broker. There it is again. And then H, all listings are taken in the name of the brokerage. You take a listing. You have 10 listings. You decide, I don't like my brokerage relationship anymore for whatever reason. You decide to move to another brokerage. Well, guess where those listings belong? To the listing broker. Everything you do, all the responsibilities are upon that listing broker or your broker. So you can't just pack up, leave, and say, and I'm taking all my listings with me. Now there's a process that you go through. You have to talk to your broker, and there's things that you have to deal with. But for the purposes of licensing and for the test and law, those are allowed to stay with the broker. All right. Roman numeral 3, broker ethics. I like to do it this way because I think it's a lot easier to remember. If you make an innocent misstatement while you're in the practice of real estate, and apply it to anything, whether it's, oops, I thought it had peers, or, oh, I didn't think it had peers, and then I found out, oh gosh, it did have peers. Whatever the situation is, a misstatement is you really didn't mean to. It's, oops, okay, it's bad. You can still get in trouble for it. Fraud, really bad. That means you knew it. You knew it to be false, and you still perpetuated it. So a seller says, let's just not say anything about all those peers I put in last year. And you say, okay, well, I need to be obedient, so I'll go ahead and go along with you. Those are the things, that's why I say that's really bad. You're not supposed to do that. Misstatement, oops, gosh, I'm really sorry. That's what a misstatement is. That's bad. Fraud, really bad. Go to A1, fraud versus puffery. Puffery is kind of a different thing. Fraud is a misrepresentation of facts. Go to B. Puffery is an opinion or an exaggeration that no one relies for decision making. For example, this is the most beautiful view in the country or county. If I say, hey, this is the best house on the market, that could be construed as, well, that's puffery. How do I know that that's actually the best house on the market? Well, it's an opinion. It's just saying, hey, I think this would be really a great house. So that's puffery. Go to B, code of ethics. Standards of ethical conduct subscribed to members of. And I'm going to stop there. If I can find some place to write on my board here. NAR. This stands for National Association of Realtors. When you get your license in the state of Oklahoma, it doesn't make you a realtor. That terminology is interchanged. People talk about, well, I'm a realtor, or they're a realtor. And I know that's been a brand that everybody kind of tosses around, thinks that's what everybody is. It's really not. NAR is if you subscribe and join, typically it's your association or MLS group, you become a member of the local, state, and national NAR, National Association of Realtors. So just because you're a licensee doesn't necessarily make you a realtor. You have to join the organization. And I guess I'm not an accountant, don't understand a whole lot about that. But I guess it's the difference between becoming an accountant and a CPA. It's kind of an organization. The difference between the realtor and the licensee is that if you're a member of NAR, which is the National Association of Realtors, you subscribe to a code of ethics, and that's in B, and I'll finish the sentences, or other real estate trade organizations. Sections of the Realtor Code have been made part of the rules and regulations governing the conduct of real estate licensees in many states. So you subscribe to a code of ethics and a code of conduct when you become a National Association of Realtor member. There might be a question on the test that says something like, all licensees are realtors. That's not the case. You have to be a member to be a realtor. Okay, let's go to the antitrust law, last section there. Number 1, allocation of customers or markets, agreement between brokers to divide their markets and refrain from competing for each other's business. A division may take place on a geographic basis or certain price range of home. What these laws are saying what you can't do. Okay, these are antitrust laws. You can't divide markets out. You can't say, okay, you're forbidden to go here, but you can go here. And brokers, the next one, number 2, is price fixing. Like I said earlier, you can't have a whole bunch of brokers all get together and go, hey, let's all charge 10%. That's price fixing. 3 is boycotting. Can't have, here it says 2 or more businesses conspire against other business to reduce competition. Can't have 5 or 6 brokers, or 2 or more in this case, and all gang up on one brokerage and go, well, we aren't going to show any of your properties, or we aren't going to deal with you. Again, that's antitrust law you cannot do. No, number 5, people violating the Sherman Antitrust Act may be found guilty of a felony punishable by a maximum of $100,000. So remember that. And that concludes Chapter 7, Law of Agency.